Leave it, Neptune. Okay, I think I should be back. Oh, Facebook's still sending data. Leave it, Neptune. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Share now. Cool. Okay. Now, hopefully, it should work. We should be good to go. All right, bet. So, we'll start again. If you're watching this and you can hear me, everything looks good, everything is all good, please let me know in the comments. Okay. So, to recap the other video really quickly, because there's been some issues. At the end, I'm gonna repost everything, edit all the technical difficulties, and just have one more concise kind of video. Yeah. So basically, the topic of this video is how to be a part of or build an inclusive community. And I mentioned in the very beginning that part of the reason I created this, I'm doing this video, is because a lot of people have been having conversations. A lot of these conversations are conversations that were had a few years ago about the same type of issue of certain people feeling left out, Black women being a big one, feeling left out. And this is something that is, you know, it's one thing to talk about it, but when you talk about it all the time, but then nothing really gets done. And the solution to this issue is simple but not easy. You have to build an inclusive community where nobody, in our case except for toxic people, feel left out. And toxic people are basically people who do harmful things, who are very disrespectful to other people, people who are predators, people who've hurt other people, and people who are disreputable, shady, dishonorable, who stab each other in the back and do things that are basically just not good things. Basically, people who are not really good people. That's toxic people. You can't really have toxic people as the core of or the big influence in any community that's going to be truly inclusive. And I gave my definition of inclusive as a community where everybody feels welcome, except for toxic people, whether you're, black, white, purple, green, brown, no matter how big you are, sexual orientation. So what that means is whether, if you're a black woman, you feel included. If you're an older lady, you feel included. If you're a white guy, you feel included. If you're gay, you feel included. LGBT community, you feel included. And no matter what religion you are or what your background is, whether you're Republican or Democrat, everybody feels included. And then practically speaking, everybody gets dances, right? And I talk about this because we have built such a community ourselves. And it's taken years. And it's not something you can do overnight, okay? So because a lot of people, and I want to give a shout out to my boy Julian in DFW, who's been spearheading another round of conversations and getting people who weren't active or a part of the solution before, trying to hold them accountable to be a part of the solution now. So I'll criticize when I feel it's necessary, but it's important to also give credit where credit is due. So Julian, big ups to you for doing what you're doing. It's an example of leadership, right? Anybody can be a leader. All you have to do is take a stand and stand by it, right? That's it. So in this video, I'm talking about things that organizers, artists, people in positions of influence can do, but also social dancers, any dancer, right? Anybody can be a leader if you set the example. And this video is meant to empower you, okay? For people, boa noite, Teresa, hey. Yeah, so people joining me from wherever you're joining me from, Facebook, YouTube, wherever in the world you're joining me from, welcome. This is something that is going to be useful no matter where you live or where you are, because these are things that every community deals with, okay? Now, I'm talking about the dance community, but you can apply this to your community, and I'm talking specifically about a lot about Kizomba because that's where I am, but it's something that you can apply to any anything. So the first thing that you can do, the first thing you need to do is ask yourself honestly, do you really want to be a part of a unified community? Sorry. I talk about unity a lot because we have a group called Kizomba Unity where we talk about these issues. So in here, I'm talking about an inclusive community, but unified community is an inclusive community, right? So yeah, if you want to be a part of the solution and talk about these issues, join the Kizomba Unity group, and I'll add a link in the description. That's a group if you want to be a part of the solution. If you just want to put your head in the sand, it's not for you. But if you want to be a part of an inclusive community, that probably doesn't describe you, right? So yeah, ask yourself, if you're more comfortable in a cliquish vibe where you're in a position of influence, you're like the cool people, right? Then you're not going to be able to build an inclusive community because you don't feel comfortable in that environment. You're a cliquish person. And I know a lot of people out there are triggered when they're called cliquish. And being cliquish doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. It's just about your personality, right? And I also say that, especially when we're talking about events, the vibe of an event is a direct reflection of the organizers. So if an event is organized by someone who is not a naturally inclusive person, and look at the organizers out there and you'll see what I'm talking about. Monica and I are naturally very warm and friendly people. We're very opinionated, blunt, and direct, and we trigger a lot of people and make a lot of people feel threatened. But besides all that, we're very warm and welcoming. You come to our event, you'll probably personally see us walking around talking to people, being silly. I'll probably come up and say what's up to you myself, right? So if that's who you are, it's easy to build that kind of vibe. If that's not who you are not going to be able to build that kind of community. Anything that you do is going to be performative at best, and it's not gonna work, right? And so for people who want to be a part of an inclusive community, that's something you have to pay attention to, and I'll talk about that at the very end because you do have a lot of power even if you're not in a position of relative influence. So you have to look deep into yourself. And I'm gonna be making a questionnaire and a self-reflection little, I guess, checklist of things that you can ask yourself to see where your head is at and see if you're really ready to be a part of the solution. Okay. So ask yourself that. People who are not inclusive are not gonna have inclusive events. If you're cliquish, then that's it, right? A lot of people are using inclusion as self-promotion, right? I'm in this demographic. I'm trying to promote for this demographic. Especially on the professional side, but we'll talk about that at the end because as organizers, there are things that we can do to create a more inclusive vibe that other people can't do because we're the ones doing hiring. And I'll talk about that at the end. So yeah, ask yourself if you're really interested, if you're authentically, if you're not an inclusive person now, you can become one, but it's not overnight. It's going to take time, just like it takes time to build an inclusive community. So you're not going to be able to do it overnight, okay? It's something that you're going to have to do over time. Now, in the short-term things you can do, I'm going to talk about that next. But the conversations and things, like what Julian is doing and solicit feedback from your community. And listen, now, from my perspective, we've had the same conversations, particularly as far as inclusion in the dance space, especially with Black women feeling left out, but also older ladies, bigger ladies, and beginners who feel left out in events, right? And these conversations we've been having for years. Now, in our sphere of influence, like I said, it's not an issue now because we listened then and built a community from the ground up that takes care of these concerns, right? But very few people have done that. Because of cancel culture, a lot of people are now scared of being canceled because they're really their spaces are not inclusive. Their spaces are full of toxic people, led by toxic people, and influenced by toxic people. So you're going to have a lot of people using the word inclusion and inclusive and doing a lot of performative things because they don't want to be canceled and lose money and influence, which is, for a lot of people who are currently in positions of influence, their main motivator, money and influence, right? So part of what I like about what's going on right now is that the culture is starting to shift towards holding people accountable. Something that we've been doing for years in our sphere of influence, but now it's starting to catch on a little bit, which makes me very happy. So that being said, if you're just trying to be inclusive to avoid cancel culture, it's not going to work. It has to be authentic and genuine, and it has to start with you. So the second thing you can do Set the example. And this is whether you are. Hold on, I gotta talk to Neptune real quick. Neptune, leave it. Dog likes to bark when he hears people downstairs. He thinks there's something going on. Sorry. So yeah, you have to set the example. And that's why I said in the first thing, if you're someone, I should be able to dance with whoever I want. And again, there are people who were at one time in our sphere of influence who are now not in our sphere of influence because they're very annoyed, in part annoyed by me talking about this. They felt like I should be able to dance with whoever I want. Okay, dance with whoever you want. But the people that we're building our community around are not choosy. The people we build our community around dance with everybody. And I'll talk about why that's good for you and for other people in a second. So you have to be the example. So when we go out to social dance, you have the dance floor, the DJ, and then there's often ladies standing around the perimeter of the dance floor, waiting for someone to come and ask them to dance. Now, this is something specifically that men are going to need to take the lead on, and maybe it's traditional gender roles, whatever, but it is what it is. Ladies tend to like it when gentlemen ask them to dance. Or I'll say it gender neutral, follows tend to enjoy when leads ask them to dance. Okay. So yeah, me being gender neutral here, I'm trying to be more inclusive. Like I said, we're not perfect. And there are things that we can work on as well, especially with gender roles and the LGBT community. There are a lot of things that aren't often talked about, and that's also needs to be a part of the conversation as well. They need to feel, if you are a lady lead, you need to feel welcome as well. If you're a male follow, you need to feel welcome as well, right? It's just dancing. This is important. You can't say you have an inclusive space if everyone doesn't feel included. So when you're going to the social dance floor and you see these ladies, and it's often ladies, because there are more women or more follows rather who tend to be in the dance, right? There's usually more follows at a party. Some people will dance with the same group of people all night. Now, why? Sometimes it's because these are the people who they're trying to holler at, have sex with, whatever. These are the cool people. These are the most advanced dancers, right? And they'll dance with them all night. And that's what they naturally do. That's what they want to do, right? And then there are people who will, like us, and again, the reason we've been able to build the community we do is because we've set the example from day one. We've always done this. We dance with people who aren't dancing. Now, who are the people who usually aren't dancing? I said this again, I'll say it again. Darker, older, bigger, less experienced dancers, right? And I say darker because even within black women, for instance, the darker women tend to have less privilege, or they tend to be more overlooked. And I'm talking about the whole dance community. They tend to be overlooked, right? And Kizomba is a little bit different because it's an African dance. And so a lot of the ladies who are looked up to are dark skinned, right? Because Angolans and Palop, and there's a lot of darker skinned ladies who you can look to in Kizomba, which is a little bit different. But social dance wise, and even sometimes hiring wise, and I'll talk about that again because our experience is a little bit different than most people because we built this inclusive community. They tend to be overlooked. So wherever you are, it may be different, right? Maybe where you are, it's mostly older people who are overlooked. Maybe where you are, it's the beginners. And those are the, dance with the people who are overlooked the most. But I guarantee you in most dance spaces, it's going to be black women, right? If you want to be inclusive, dance with people who aren't dancing. The hot young things and the popular dancers, they're going to get dances, right? Now, you might be saying, well, that's not true. Where I am, there are black women who get dances a lot. And yeah. When you look at most of these spaces, anyone who bucks that trend, it's because they're either advanced or they're in with the inner circle of the cliques or the people who are popular in that group, right? And so what often a lot of ladies will do is they'll try to kind of get in good with the cliques so that they can get dances. Now, this goes into the toxic enablement culture, which I'll talk about in a second, because that is something that's going to absolutely cancel anything that you're trying to do in the example that you're trying to set. You can't have an inclusive environment where where toxic enablement culture or toxic enablement syndrome, I guess, is going on. Okay, so that being said, whether you're a social dancer, organizer, whatever, look when you go to an event or a social or whatever. Look and see who's not dancing. Dance with them. Okay, pay attention to who it is. Look. It's probably often going to be black women, especially darker black women, especially when it comes to social dancing, right? Particularly if they're, older, bigger, less experienced. These are the people who you need to be dancing with if you want an inclusive community. Now, some might say, well, I want to dance with the best dancers. Here's the other thing that actually benefits you. One, the best dancers aren't necessarily going to be the ones who look a certain way, right? The hot young things. The hot young things are often not the best dancers in the room. Often the best dancer in the room might be an older, bigger lady. Then you look at them and you write them off because of how they look. But then they're the best dancer in the room with good energy, and they appreciate that you asked them to dance, and you have a beautiful, wonderful time. And I've been doing this ever since I first started dancing. And particularly, especially when I started teaching, I made a point to do this, especially when we were hired to teach or at our events, because I feel like that's part of, Later, I found out there was a thing called taxi dancing, which I've been doing from forever. And I was like, oh, and I'll talk about taxi dancing in a second, because it's another Band-Aid, right? In an inclusive community, you don't really need taxi dancers. And when I said this, there are people who got butthurt and defensive about this, but it's the truth. Note on that. Walk around, see who's not dancing, and dance with them. And what I've learned is, I would go places, and some of the best dances I've ever had were with ladies who were not getting dances. Usually because in Europe, it's, again, older, darker, bigger. Those are the main three things. And then also if you're a beginner, right? But you can't necessarily look at someone and tell if they're a beginner, right? Just if someone's like shy and nervous, people are like, oh, they must be a beginner. I'm not going to dance with them. But yeah, older, bigger, darker. And some of the best dances I've had were with people who fit that description. And I remember going to Europe, and there was one lady. She was a white lady, but she was really tall and really big. Okay, she was like maybe 300-ish pounds. And I remember because she was standing near the speaker and nobody was asking her to dance. And of course I see this. She's been standing there for like an hour. Nobody's asked her to dance. And of course for me, I'm like, this is horrible. Like, this lady has paid her money to be out here just like everybody else. This is wrong. So of course I'm like, this is messed up. I'm going to go dance with her. I didn't know what to expect. I just kept an open mind. Turns out she was a belly dancer and had moves. She moved like Jello. I had a lovely dance. And when I finished dancing with her, I had to pull Monica over like Monica. Now, Monica is like a third of this lady's size, right? But she was like, oh my God, such a great dance. And this happens often. There are people who've been overlooked in the dance community, and we try to lift them up, right? Because again, the best dancers aren't going to necessarily be with the ones who are the hot young things or the ones you want to smash. Now, if your purpose is to smash, that's one thing. But again, that's not an inclusive community, and you can't do that and then say you want to be a part of an inclusive community. It doesn't go together, right? And we've been saying this for years. There are a lot of people, again, now who are going to want to be performative about this and appear inclusive, especially people who have been known to be misogynistic or gaslighting people and doing things like this or engaging in bad behavior. There's going to be a lot of performative stuff going on right now because people don't want to get canceled. Don't fall for the okie doke. And I'll talk about what, even if you don't want to be in a position of leadership, what you can do as just a consumer and social dancer at the end. As an organizer, you sure as hell should be doing this, because I'll say it again. If a space is not inclusive, it is a fault of the leaders of that space. The organizers, the teachers, the artists, the people who host events, those are the people who are responsible. Now, again, because most spaces in the dance community are not inclusive, this may piss off a lot of people. If your event is not inclusive, if there are a lot of people who go to your event, pay money for your event, and they feel left out. Now, again, every event might have one or two people, you might have exceptions here, but if you have significant people saying that they are being overlooked, they're not getting dances, If people are saying they're never getting hired, and I'll talk about that again at the end because, yeah, especially in Kizomba, it's not that simple. And I'm going to talk about that. But if people, especially social dancers, are not feeling included at your events, it's your fault as an organizer. Because you look at it, people who are not cliquish tend to create inclusive atmospheres. People who are knee deep in cliques don't. If you are a part of a clique, it's going to feel inclusive because you're in the clique. But the difference, and like, put a note on this, guys, the difference between a community and a clique is not how it feels when you're inside. It's how it feels when you're outside. I'll say it again. The difference between a clique and a community is not how it feels when you're on the inside. It's how it feels when you're on the outside. Okay? So there are a lot of people, and a clique is basically a group of friends, and that's what they'll say. People in cliques don't say clique, right? Clique is a trigger word for cliquish people. People in cliques hate to be called cliquish, even if they are, because to them it just feels like these are my friends getting together. And this cliquishness, we're going to talk about this in a second, especially when it comes to the hiring part, because the standards are going to be a little bit different if you're someone who wants to get hired and paid to do professional services, right? If you're just a social dancer, it's whatever. But the problem with this cliquish environment is it's led to this toxic enablement syndrome. And I'm going to talk about that in 1 second because that'll be the next point. So if you're an organizer especially, you need to be making sure that people in your spheres of influence did it. Mother. My thing paused again. Ain't that a... Hold on, I'm checking to see if what is going on, man? It's OBS. Bitch. Oops, sorry for cussing. Okay, I'm gonna have to set this whole thing. Sorry, gonna have to set this thing off again.